Hey Rick, welcome back everybody to Carl and Rick Talk Risk. How's it going?
Yo, hi everyone. Hi Carl. So you look extra refreshed. You've been
I am
traveling.
a little tan.
Wow.
I mean, if you under this hoodie.
Look at that well-rested man. Holy smoke. So where'd you go? What'd you do?
Well, Rick, I'm back from Antalya, Turkey, the fourth most visited city in the world, above New York City, believe it or not. Yeah, the land of all inclusives. And of course, I flew there and back. And you know what? I had a funny thought while I was in the plane. Um, the safety instructions were in a couple of different languages, none of which I spoke, but I felt like I understood every single word because I've been on so many flights as most people have, and they've heard those instructions again and again and again. It's been drummed and how I would fare in an emergency, I don't know, but I've heard them a lot. Yeah, heard them in Turkish, heard them in Dutch. Yeah, didn't understand, didn't need to. But yeah, how much do people actually listen to that anymore? And does it actually make people better risk managers? Does it call to their mind that, oh, I need to be vigilant, I need to understand these safety cards that I have in front of me with all the great instructions? What do you think?
Well, first off, um, I've got to explain. I was on a flight in the Middle East once, and the person next to me actually did not know how to use the seatbelt. I
Okay.
I can't make this up. And they were a migrant worker, and this was obviously the first time that they'd ever been on a plane.
Right.
And it was a short haul flight, and it was at night. And as obviously our viewers may or may not know, I'm not a tiny guy. This person was relatively tiny.
Okay.
Okay. They weren't a child worker or whatnot.
Yeah.
Obviously, their first time on a flight. So I had to show them how to do their seatbelt. Literally, they had no clue.
Right.
Okay. And then made a very fatal mistake is they were trying to get up and they didn't realize that the seatbelt was keeping them in. So I showed them how to open the seatbelt. So I opened the seatbelt for the person. Okay. I was sitting in the window seat. They were in the aisle. All of a sudden, they realized that there's a window next to me.
Hmm.
And I cannot make this up. What they did was they came and they knelt in my lap. So I had this person kneeling on my lap, looking out the window as we're about to land. And the stewardess is, I'm like, I had no clue what to say or what to do.
Yeah.
Okay. This was just such a bizarro situation. So, those safety messages are absolutely so necessary. Not. Okay. Here's the point. When we have those safety messages, what do? Well, we fall into one and two camps. Okay. A small percentage of the people will say, oh my God, flying is so dangerous. It's so horrible. They're going through this because we're going to crash. In other words, what it does is for a small number of flyers, it probably increases their anxiety.
Hmm.
For the vast majority of flyers, it's like, just get this
Not again.
flipping plane off the ground. Like, I mean, seriously.
Hmm.
Uh, and so we totally ignore. We totally ignore about it. I wrote a blog about this several years ago, back when I used to write blogs. And I mentioned one airline that I fly a lot, and the stewardesses and stewards used to make little jokes during the safety demonstration.
Hmm.
And on that airline, people actually listened to it because they were
Yeah.
allowed to inject their personality in it.
Yeah.
Ironically, I flew the airline last week, and that was gone. It was strictly by the book.
Ah, interesting. Okay, I think I know
And
the one you're talking about, and I used to enjoy them too, the little
yeah,
spiels and everything. Yeah.
yeah, because you kind of want to see what they're going to do different this time, and
Yeah. Yeah.
how they're going to inject their personality into it.
Yeah.
And so what it does is it leads us to become blasé about risk because let's think about it.
Yeah.
The stewards and stewardesses are there. They're showing you how to fasten the seatbelt, and they're bored out of their gourd.
Yeah.
Okay, they know it's a farce, and thus they project to you that's a farce.
Mm.
And um, so if they did it on like every 10th flight, if they randomly selected to do it on every 10th flight,
Mm.
it would probably be far, far, far more uh, effective. I don't know if 10 is the right number, but doing it on every flight and for every segment of the flight, and then of course on international flights, doing it again before you land, I
Mm.
believe is actually totally counterproductive, and it makes us become blind to the risk mitigants that are there to help us.
Hmm.
But I've got an even more pressing issue. When I flew last week, I felt far safer, far, far, far safer, because the Federal Aviation Administration in the US said that no smoking signs no longer have to be capable of being turned off. Can you
Yeah.
believe that the FAA actually grounded planes because the no smoking sign did not have an off switch on it? You know, how ridiculous is that? There
How
hasn't
would you
been
know
smoking
without?
on a flight like what, 30 years? I don't know,
Yeah.
20 years, 30 years? But yet still they're concerned that the no smoking sign needs an on and off switch on it in the cockpit. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah.
What a ridiculous
It
mandate.
it treats people like robots, right? Like there needs to be a constant input, like a constant reminder for the bot to keep doing what it's doing. I mean, humans are not like that. We everybody knows.
I realize that I'm going to upset some of our audience here, and I really don't mean to. But, uh, from my days as an industry practitioner and from heading a desk, okay, um, I was always quite critical of not all, but most regulators,
Mm.
okay? And as any of my students will tell you in my capital markets classes, I'm fond of telling them that every morning I used to get up and thank God for accountants and regulators, because every time one of them opened their mouth, there was four more opportunities or four more loopholes for me to exploit that day. Okay. Uh, and the point is the regulators do not have the same objectives, the same goals as operators or companies or institutions when they go to set regulations. I realize that safety is paramount. I get that. I realize that the public good is paramount. I also recognize that no one gets blamed for no one gets awarded for good risk management. No one
Hmm.
gets awarded when the plane lands safely, or no one gets awarded when you know uh, eating a Big Mac burger doesn't kill you.
Hmm.
Okay, given what's currently going on with the onions in the quarter pounders in the U.S. Okay, with the onions. I get that no one applauds good risk management, but that doesn't mean that you have to go to the ridiculous to protect against the downside.
Hmm.
Um, so, get back to your question. We really need to be reasonable about our risk practices. We really need to
Yeah.
say, what value add is this risk doing?
Yeah.
You know, I I believe, and I realize quite rightly that many listeners will disagree with me in this, but I believe that in many organizations, risk management should be a profit center. Okay. And I realized that in almost every organization, risk management is a cost center.
Yeah.
But again, as you know, I believe that definition of risk management is managing so as to increase the probability magnitude of good outcomes occurring while working to decrease the probability and severity of bad outcomes occurring. The feeling is amongst regulators is that there is no limit to the budget. There is no limit to the resources for preventing even the tiniest and tiniest and tiniest of bad risk outcomes.
Yeah.
And the safety announcements on flights is just one evidence of that.
Yeah. Well, it's the veneer of safety, right? It's the yeah. One thing I found interesting in Turkey is a lot of public places, malls, and the airport. You go through security before you get to kind of the gates and the actual security and everything. But it's a very uh, it's like you throw your stuff on a conveyor belt and you walk through a frame. I don't think those frames were on. It's sort of this like veneer of safety that, maybe a somebody who does want to cause harm would look at that and say, "Hey, maybe not today." No, it's not really serving much of a purpose. Um, but yeah, it just becomes
Well,
part of things.
maybe for one of our future podcasts, I can dig up uh, an old op-ed by the head of um, he was the head of the department in the U.S. that kind of came up with a response after 9/11 for airport safety.
Okay.
And he basically totally blasts that argument of the need for the veneer of safety.
Yeah.
And perhaps I'll go back into my archives and look that up because uh, there are real economic costs to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when the risk mitigants, I'm not against risk mitigants costing, having a cost or
Mhm.
diminishing outcomes.
Mhm.
But when they're orders of magnitude more, um, then reason has to start to come into play.
Yeah, yeah, and you could literally see the complacency, right, on the security guards' faces that
Oh yeah.
we don't care. I'm stepping slightly outside of my knowledge base here, but so I would need to go and read
Oh, I always
more
step
about it.
outside my knowledge base,
Yeah.
so go for it.
Maybe it is a future episode where I read up on what I'm about to say and you read up on that investigation. But I know that, I mean, one of the most dangerous parts in the world is obviously Israel. Israel faces the threat of attacks all the time, and from the little I've read, they do very well with profiling. So they really do look. They have people trained in watching people's behavior, and picking them out of line, and yeah, checking them, making sure, seeing if there's any real threat there. And that's the total opposite, right?
Oh,
That's a
but
more
Carl, it is
risk-based
so
approach.
good. It is so good that you are no longer in Canada because profiling is very, 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 very evil.
Yeah, those kind of blanket statements. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I know Israel's thought to be one of the best in the world. Not everybody might agree with their tactics, but they face real threats every day, and this is what they find effective. So I think we should learn from those cases.
Yeah, what I take from that is it's a holistic approach
Yeah,
to managing risk in context rather
yeah,
than trying to build up every single risk mitigant that you can think of
yeah,
so that you're exhaustive. It's basically what's effective rather than what's going to prevent a lawsuit, which are
yeah,
very,
exactly.
very, very different
Yeah.
ways of looking at risk management.
Yeah, yeah. Just one thing, like, um, thinking all this through as we're talking, and I'm seeing, I've said complacency a couple of times, and I really see that in risk systems too, where, and we've spoken about that with AI as well. If there's too much of it, you find a lot of human complacency that,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
the systems are taking care of it, the screening is taking care of it, security is. But how do you build in vigilance? How do you build in systems that are constantly learning and evolving and keeping humans part of the process, so that whatever automation is there can improve alongside.
Well, of course, that's a big part of risk homeostasis as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
If the risk system's really good, people become complacent, and
yeah,
thus their actions actually make the overall probability of a negative risk outcome occurring much higher
yeah,
than that would
yeah.
have been without any risk mitigants. We talked about risk homeostasis, quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You forget about the tails, right? You think that like these are the only cases that can occur, and you forget, well,
But
there's tails.
actually, I would argue that uh, in a lot of cases of risk homeostasis, it's the really simple stuff that comes back to bite you.
Yeah, yeah,
We don't even have to worry about the tails or the extremes. In fact, I'd argue the exact opposite. Uh, we can almost never deal with the tails. Okay,
right.
we can never
Yeah,
expect the tails. Like, no safety announcement would have prevented that guy from jumping in my lap.
right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Actually, having said that, now there's probably some regulator in Washington, having writing the script so that now the stewards and stewardesses, and instead of flipping the book and telling you how to fasten your seatbelt and fasten it securely over your nose and mouth.
yeah,
If you're traveling with a passenger, you secure your own mask first. Are now going to add, do not jump into another person's lap while the flight is landing. I'm sure that there's some regulator sitting
yeah.
down now saying, gee, never thought of that. That's a really good point. I got to write that down.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And yeah, that you can't protect against the tails. I think you often say, is it a trend or is it a cycle?
Cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so like, if I see your point. If things stick within a channel for a long time, you kind of miss these things that happen from time to time that are not really in the tails, but you still need to be prepared for.
Let me tell you, when someone jumps on your lap to look out your window,
Yeah.
you notice it.
I bet. Not a lot of personal space on those planes as it is. So,
Particularly given how large I am, but anyhow.
yeah. Okay. Ulrich, this has been a great episode. More flying guidance coming in a future episode.
Safe
Anyway,
flights, everyone. Have
safe
fun.
flights. Thanks.